we'll start right here at the bottom of our list with Steve Bjorkman, who is the founder and CEO, I guess, of NotaryGadget. Many of you on this call are probably customers of Steve. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're
Excited to be here.
Very excited to have you. And then I'm joined by my sister, Lori Glockner, our Director of Operations and Mentoring and Accounting and many other things here at Notary2Pro. Welcome, Lori. And Lori is staying muted because for a moment at least, because her dog is asleep at her feet and snoring apparently. So we'll hear from Lori later. We're also joined by Andrea Dooling, our faculty member. Andrea is a fantastic YouTuber on her own, has great stuff, training out there for notaries under Not Me Notary. And she's also, for today's call, a big fan of NotaryGadget. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And last but not least, Alana Acosta-Cavallet, who is our marketing analyst and helps make all these roundtables happen. So hopefully everybody's been chatting and joining us in chat. We look forward to getting questions from everyone. Why don't we just kind of dive in, Alana? Oh, I've already gone through this. 30 minutes, I jump ahead apparently. 30 minutes teaching you how to expand your skills, grow your business, or just make life better. And today's topic, we're talking about tax tips and reminders and really organization tips for everyone. This is the time of year when we start thinking about our taxes. Hopefully you're thinking about your taxes already, so we have some great tips from our panel today. Okay, Alana, can you lead us through some of this? Where does this come from? We have tips from specific folks later, but where does this come from?
Sure. So we wrote a tax article for 2024 that should be coming up on Notary2Pro in a week or so, and we just talked about organization. So really making sure that you're keeping detailed invoices, your W-2s, your 1099s, receipts, bank statements, just all of that, making sure that you're staying organized, and using specialty software like NotaryGadget can help with that.
Awesome. Hey, Andrea, earlier you shared a little bit of an anecdote that you tried to do all this stuff on your own. And then what happened?
So you want me to embarrass myself? Is that what you're saying?
Sure.
So
That's why I asked.
My first week, I tried creating my own Excel spreadsheet to kind of house how much I was spending, the companies I was working for, who had paid, who hadn't, yada, yada. It was a disaster trying to keep up with all of that. It was not user-friendly. And I like to think that I'm okay with Excel. I'm not terrible, but I'm not the best of the best. So I ventured out and I found a wonderful software, NotaryGadget, that helps me stay organized by putting things on my calendar, by allowing me to put in, scan in my invoices, by reminding me to send invoices. So yeah, NotaryGadget is my best friend and has been my best friend since week 2.
Wow, that's a testimony right there, Steve.
I know, this is a glowing one. I love these.
A nice setup. Awesome. So while we're kind of talking about this, I'd love to hear a little bit before we go back into this whole organization and what NotaryGadget does. If you could tell our audience sort of a little bit of the story of NotaryGadget and how this all came about, so that people like Andrea can be raving fans.
So yeah, sure. So NotaryGadget, I'm actually not a notary, which is sort of the ironic part about all of this, because I didn't really understand all of the things that notaries need to do. What I did is I had a friend of mine who was a notary, and he used to use QuickBooks at the time, and he used to always talk about how, and this was, this is over 10 years ago now, But he would always talk about how difficult it was. That the big problem he had was tracking who had paid him and who had not paid him. Because most of the times you do a signing, you obviously don't get paid on the spot unless you're doing like general notary work or something, right? You're getting paid by a signing company or escrow or whomever. And he was like, and he was really busy at the time too. So I don't remember how many signings he was doing a month. I want to say it was maybe like 60 or 70 signings or something a month, right? And he's like, just trying to track all this stuff. He's like, half the job is doing the signing, and the other half of the job is all this like back office stuff that I have to do.
Sure.
That's near impossible to do. He's like, and then on top of that, he was telling me about the tax benefits of being a notary and how you can write your notarial acts go against your self-employment tax, which that's part of one of the topics I'll talk about. But and he was like, there's no way to track this inside of QuickBooks, at least there wasn't at that time.
Yeah.
And he's like, and not only that, he's like, but I'm not an accounting person, so he's like trying to use what we call a hardcore accounting software is pretty difficult to do. It's like, again, it's like a whole nother job or sub job of what you're doing. So
Sure.
He was really frustrated because it was taking up like 50% of his time was all the back office stuff. And the other 50% was actually doing the work that he was getting paid for. And that's a pretty bad ratio. So that was where I came up with the idea for NotaryGadget. But, you know, as I've said many a podcast and many a forum like this, is that I would love to tell you that I was this brilliant guy who thought of all these great things of NotaryGadget, not even remotely close to being the case. I just kind of took what he said, created actually what my intent initially was to create this just basic kind of accounting software to just basically track who had you done work for and had they paid you or not. That was really the foundational part of it. But once we started getting more and more users started using it, they're like, oh, it would be nice if we could do this and we could do this and we could do this and we could do this. And now what you see today is, you know, over 10 years of customer and user suggestions that have kind of built it into what it is today, especially me not being a notary, but I've certainly learned a lot during the course of that time. But, you know, and we're always trying to continue to build that software. So now I never say it's really an accounting software anymore. It's really a manage your entire notary business software is really what it does. It does everything from accounting to, you know, trying to manage your day, to mapping out your trips, to, you know, tracking your packages when you mail them. There's just so many things that it does now that it's hard to say it's just one thing. It kind of, the idea now is it's sort of like, as I call it, it's a business in a box. It's like, you want to buy a piece of software that helps you manage your entire business. That's what NotaryGadget does for you.
Awesome. And that's been your experience for sure, Andrea.
100%.
Yeah. So, you know, I think one of the things that we train to at Notary2Pro is to set expectations for notaries that, you know, the notary itself, the loan signing itself, or the you know, the notarization of these documents is critical, but it is only part of the job. You're also a business owner, an entrepreneur, and so staying organized is really critical. And it takes a lot of effort to keep track. We'd love to hear from our audience about some of the particular challenges that they have, especially now that we're approaching tax season. Like, what do you struggle with most in terms of organization? Steve, you mentioned the billing process. So can you, because this is a particular concern, if you don't have your billing process and your receivables process ironed out, you may not know what money you have outstanding. You may be missing out on money, right?
Oh, there's, you know, that was probably the biggest thing that, you know, our users initially loved was like, hey, I can actually tell who owes me money. And what you would find, or what we found from many stories from, you know, early customers, is they would end up doing signings for companies, and not because they weren't tracking when they were getting paid. They're just kind of assuming they were getting paid for everything. Once they started using NotaryGadget, they go back and be like, oh my God, these guys owe me like $1,000 in unpaid invoices.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, anybody who's been in this business, or any business for that matter, is once those receivables go beyond a certain time frame, the odds of collecting them are like slim to none, right? Because once it goes beyond 60 or 90 days after the signing, and, you know, and a lot of times, especially if that company doesn't have a good process in place, and they might not even be doing it intentionally. In many cases, it's just they're not organized either. So the loan funds, and then the you know, the loan funds for the purchase, and the funds get distributed to everybody, and then they all go away, and everybody takes their cut and everything else. And then when there's nothing left, and somebody missed paying you out of that money, then what happens is somebody's got to cover it, right? So a lot of times you'll end up in these cases where, this is what we found, is when you deal with like an escrow officer, and it was the escrow officer's responsibility to make sure that you got paid out of it, but because they screwed up and didn't pay you, the broker for them is like, hey, I'm not paying for it. This was your screw up. And then now all of a sudden you got an escrow officer who's got to take, 120 or whatever, some amount of money out of their paycheck. And they're like, well, I don't have the money to pay it. So then they just, until you kind of, I'll say catch them, until you show them, hey, you didn't pay me this. But if it goes beyond 90 days, then they're like, what happens? You tell them that, and then all of a sudden they stop sending you work because they owe you money, right?
Right.
But so that big thing that we found is like, it just helped people stay on top of their billing. So then you could say, hey, it's been 30 days. I still haven't got paid for this. Oh, okay. It's still fresh, right? There's still time to get you paid out of that. So that was, I think, one of the biggest things that we saw was that whole billing thing. And anybody knows, is it's like anything. The busier you get in any job or any business that you do, the little cracks, I always say, become giant crevices, right? It's the little things that start to fall through and stack up and add up. And that's the same thing. When you're really busy, like, you don't really have time to do a bunch of billing and trying to track everything in out. So, and I won't try not to promote NotaryGadget too much or anything, but like, that's one of the things NotaryGadget or any software that you do. And I think it's what Andrea initially attempted to do with Excel, is you need some way you can log in and be like, this is exactly how much I'm owed from each of my customers. And if you can just see that in a simple glance, then you initially know. So when they call you for a signing, hey, yeah, I don't mind doing this. By the way, do you have the, there's still 3 signings I haven't been paid for. I need you to pay me for those too. And then, the whole situation becomes a lot more friendly, as opposed to trying to follow up with somebody 90 days later. Or, I've seen stuff where people are still keep it on there 300 days later. I was like, you haven't been paid in 300 days? I hate to break it to you, but you probably aren't getting paid. Yeah.
Probably not going to see any of that.
Yeah, probably not going to see anything there, right? But that's a big part of that whole process. So
right. So Andrea, are you staying on top of your billing? Do you know exactly what you're owed? And
Am I staying on top of it? I'm not as good as I want to be, but I am far better with it than without it.
Okay, all right.
Everything is current. I did make a goal that this year I was going, as things started coming in, I was going to start entering in everything and not letting everything just pile up and then take several hours to work on it. So I'm doing better this year.
Oh, good. And now, as we're approaching tax season, how are you organized, and what are some of the things that you see in terms of making sure that you're getting those tax forms and received and filed appropriately?
So I am organized in that respect. The one thing that I do often is, a lot of times with the different businesses that I work with, let's say Staples or Quill or what have you, because I have subscriptions with them, I keep all of those receipts. If they email it to me, I have a folder just for receipts for those types of things. Therefore, if I forget to put it in NotaryGadget, at the end of the year, I always go back through that whole folder to ensure that everything is matching up, that I haven't forgotten anything. Therefore, when it comes to my expenses on NotaryGadget, it is absolutely as accurate as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is one thing that I do.
Great approach.
Okay. Alana, what else do we have here?
Before we move on, someone from the audience is asking Steve if there's any consideration to add a scan back feature that allows users to click an option if scan backs are required. And if so, if it could send a reminder to scan back documents once complete.
Yes, it's on the dev schedule. It'll be later this year. There's a couple things that are in front of it that are coming, but yes, there'll be like I don't know if the person is or not, but there's an extra, what we call, inside of NotaryGadget, you have these colorful icons that we call alerts. And the whole concept behind NotaryGadget is that it always keeps you focused on stuff that you need to do. The idea is once everything's done on a signing, it like goes away off the view. And that's the whole idea, is because you don't need to focus on it. It's already done. You've already been paid for it. Move on. So one of those, like the three main ones, are tracking whether an invoice has been sent to the customer, whether you've entered your mileage, and whether you've entered your notarial acts. And there's a fourth one that's turned off by default, but you can turn it on, and that is whether or not an appointment has been confirmed. And so that's a very valuable one, especially for very busy notaries, you know, because a lot of times you're trying to figure out whether your appointment's been confirmed with the borrower. So the next one that's going to be on there is the scan back feature. There's a bunch of users that ask that. So yeah, it's going to be right in that same section.
And for our audience's information, what's a scan back?
So a scan back is when you have taken a closing or a signing, and once you've gone to the signer's home or what have you, the company then wants you to scan all the documents back to them. And sometimes it's really important that you scan those documents because monies won't get transferred on the back end until they have received those scanned documents.
Okay, great. Sounds like a useful add-on. Okay, perfect.
I'm excited about that one.
Yeah. We've been asked it for a while. There was a bunch of things that we had to put in place before we could put that into place. There's this whole architecture in the background that you guys saw with the release of the app about a year ago. Like that was part of that, how to all be released, because when we do that, it affects all of that stuff too. So
yeah, awesome. It sounds, Steve, like you've been really you know, led to a better and better place by your own customers.
Oh, we wouldn't develop software any other way. I think it's the only way to do. I mean, you can try to force people into what you think is right, but it's really a hybrid between the two, right? Like sometimes we have, and we've had this where we think that we have these great ideas and release them and nobody uses them. We're like, okay, that was clearly a flop. But then, you know, there's sometimes we'll get users who say, not sometimes, all the time, we get users who say, hey, you should really do this. And you're like, oh, that's a great idea. Or they're like, well, why don't you just do it like this? And you're like, oh, duh, that's a great way to do it. So, you know, it's like anything. It's sort of like, we call it like the NotaryGadget team, and the team kind of includes our users as well, because they all, you know, without them, we wouldn't be as good as we are. So like we always listen to feedback. I don't know, Andrea, if you've ever sent any in or not, but it's a little bit different now because we've had so many, you know, 10 years of development. So we've got a nice short list of the stuff that's coming up over in the next 6 months or so. But and almost all of it, I can't say I can think of a single one that was our idea. I think it's all users' ideas.
Andrea, I knowing you as you do, I suspect you provided feedback.
Oh, every time they do that. Every
Good.
time, because hey, it
glad.
can only be better. I already love it, but hey, here's something else that can possibly be useful.
We love it. What more the better. More the better. Yep.
Okay. All right. We would be remiss in a tax conversation not to mention this. And would somebody, everybody's probably tired of listening to me, would somebody like to explain the difference between notarization fees and the impact on? Nobody wants to take it.
Yes, I can absolutely.
Steve is gonna go. I knew
videos on it. You can.
I knew I was happy you're gonna be.
I got one. Oh yeah. No, this is like, this is the one thing that if anybody gets out of today's video conference is this. This is by far the one thing that you'll walk away and say, thank God I came to this conference because I didn't know that. Because this is by far, I think, the most overlooked, most impactful thing you have as a notary. So I'm going to jump in. So
okay, please.
Let's talk about what self-employment tax is. So everybody who works knows that you have to pay federal income tax. And if you live in a state, which most states, there's only a handful that don't have a state income tax. So normally, like I live in Michigan, so I have to pay federal income tax and Michigan state income tax. So your federal income tax is a graduated scale, right? So you pay anywhere from, I think the lowest is like 10% all the way up to like 37%, something like that, depending on what your income level is. Then you have state tax, which in most states is like, it's somewhat of a graduated scale or it's a flat rate. In Michigan, it's like a flat rate. It's like 4.4%. Okay. So let's just say, and I think on average, most people will be in, I'll call it the 20 to 25% tax bracket is pretty normal. So that means that, let's call it a 25% tax bracket. And let's say you live in Michigan, that's 29% that you're going to pay on all of your net income. And when I say net income is another word for profit. So that is your income minus your business expenses. That's what you pay taxes on. And actually, I should say it's a little less than that because you get some deductions through your standard, through your your normal tax exemptions and all that sort of stuff. But let's just call it, for sake of argument, 29%. Now, what nobody usually knows or realizes that when you're self-employed, you get to pay another nice bonus tax to the tune of 15.3%. So not only now we are not at 29%, now we're at like 44% that we're going to pay in taxes. And the whole idea behind what self-employment tax is, it's designed to replace your Social Security tax. So Social Security and Medicare. So when you go to work for a company, when you're a W-2 employee, if you ever look at your paycheck, you always get FICA taken out, which is your Social Security plus Medicare tax, which is the two together are 7.65%. Now, what a lot of people also don't know is when you're an employee and you get that taken out of your check and it goes to the government, the company that you work for has to match that amount as well. So the 7.65% plus 7.65% is 15.3%, which is magically the same rate as self-employment tax. So the way that the IRS looks at it is they basically say, hey, when you work for yourself, you're kind of part company, you're like part employee and you're part employer. So they say, oh, well, you should be responsible for both of those taxes because the IRS always gets their cut. So what happens is a lot of people overlook that amount. So they go and they say, oh, okay, hey, I took my taxes, I made $100 and I only had to pay 29% in taxes. Well, no, you don't. You got to pay 44%. And the problem is most people don't realize it until you file your taxes at the end of the year and your accountant is like, oh yeah, by the way, you owe 10 grand. And you're like, what? Where did that come from? That's your 15% that you didn't save for, that you now owe the IRS. So one of the biggest advantages you have as a notary, there's only, I think, two things that are two types of professions that can be exempt from self-employment tax, and that is being a pastor and being a notary. Now, the way it works with notaries is not all of your income or not all of your net income is exempt from self-employment tax. Only the portion that you earn for doing notarial acts. So let's say, for example, you go to a signing, say you get paid $100 for it, and you do let's say you do 5 notarial acts during that signing. And let's say in your state that you're allowed to charge $10 per notarial act. So when you go to file your taxes now, you have 5 notarial acts at $10 a piece is $50. So $50 of that $100 is now exempt from self-employment tax. Now remember, you only pay self-employment tax and all your other taxes based on your net income. So now you get to deduct all your expenses and then you get to apply that $50 of notarial acts towards the amount that you earned.
Right.
So what essentially ends up happening is if you have to track all this stuff, obviously, but what you get to do is you can then take and use all of the maximum amount that you could have earned from notarial acts, and you get to reduce the amount of self-employment tax that you would normally pay. So let me use like a better real world example. I don't really have a good illustration for this, but so let's say that you made $100,000 this year. Okay, that was net income and profit. So if even half of that was from notarial acts, that would be $50,000 of it that is exempt from self-employment tax. That's $7,500 in tax savings that you get that because you're a notary that no other self-employed person. The Uber driver goes out and does the same thing, they pay 15.3% on it. Yeah. Whereas you're a notary, whatever portion of it that you use for your notarial acts, you don't have to pay self-employment tax on that portion of it.
So a couple of follow-up questions, Steve.
Yep.
NotaryGadget allows you to separate income between your fees for notarial for notarizations versus notarial acts. Is that correct?
Yeah. So your fees for so like if you're doing, we'll call it a notary job. Okay. So if you do that $100, in NotaryGadget, you type in the number of notarial acts that you did during that signing, and then put whatever the maximum rate is for your state. and it automatically calculates that, and then even reports it on your profit and loss report, which is the report you use for your taxes. And it even separates out, it tells you how much you saved. It tells you, it tells you what your notarial act deduction is, how much you saved in self-employment taxes, even outlines the tax code. Because here's another problem, is that a lot of accountants, especially if you're going to like a tax preparer, like an H&R Block, I won't beat up H&R Block
or something.
they're obviously, I'm sure, fine, but like any of those kind of like general tax preparers that don't have a real in-depth knowledge of the tax law, a lot of times they'll go in and they don't even know. So you hand this profit and loss report to them, they say, okay, cool, and they type it into your Schedule C, which is what we see on the screen right there. So they type in all the numbers, but on there, if you're not reporting your notarial acts, and if they don't know to report them, you could give them all this information, and then you still get burned at the end of the day on your taxes. So one of the
I'm sorry, Steve, we're going to run out of time. And
sorry, go ahead.
I just want to mention a very important point is that you mentioned, Steve, that this states have defined notarization or fees for notarization. Sorry, turned around a little bit. So that's the limit, right? For these, and we have to be able to separate out when we're reporting our income, these notarization fees that are defined by the state. Very important way of saving some money. And we've kind of talked about this before. We've got articles on the website. Please take a look at that if you have further questions, or contact us. Okay. Alana, I think we're probably going to run a little short. But what else do we have here in terms of staying organized that we want to make sure that we're covering today?
Well, we just have to discuss deductions. So just a reminder to not be afraid to ask about them, and almost anything that you are required to purchase out of pocket to complete your job can be considered a deduction. So such as like notary training, notary supplies, software, parking, things like that, those can all be deducted.
Yeah, and I think that third bullet point here is really important, is that keep track and document all of your expenses. Let your accounting professional, your tax professional make a determination about what's deductible, what's not. You can't deduct what you don't track. And so keeping track of all of it is very important. Let's let the professional decide, no, actually, that's probably not something you can deduct. But to your point, almost anything that's a direct business expense or required to purchase in order to do your job is often deductible. So, and we'd be remiss, Steve, if we didn't ask you. You can track all your business expenses.
Yeah, of course. You track, upload receipts, scan receipts with the app, all that stuff. Yep.
It makes it a lot easier, right, Andrea?
For sure.
Yeah, okay. I need a NotaryGadget for my consulting business, because I have folders and spreadsheets, and I suspect that's a way of a lot of our audience are doing their own businesses. So. Alana, we only have, are we at time actually?
We are at time, but really quickly, let's go over our expert tips and reminders.
Okay, we apologize to our audience for going a little bit over today, but I'll keep this very quick. The most important reminder from me to everybody is two things. Start planning now for next year. Organization starts from the very first part of your tax year, keeping track of things. And then my other thing I will advise is get professional advice. And if you look at this, if you can save $1,000 with good tax advice, how many signings is that to you, right? It's a lot of signings. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of billing. It's a lot of administration and all of that stuff. So it's money in your pocket by getting good advice. and then we'll move along here.
Okay, so I guess this is me. So I already talked about tracking your notarial acts. The one thing I was just about to say there too is, the biggest thing I could say is just like you said, make sure you find a professional, find, an accountant. I always look for somebody who's an actual CPA, not just a tax preparer. CPA goes through years of schooling and they have to pass a very rigorous exam. They're accountants. A certified public accountant is what a CPA stands for. But you'd be surprised because even a lot of CPAs don't know about this tax rule, and it is so important. And what I always say, there's another great takeaway from this that I want you to have is, if you're saying, hey, I don't know, go to Google, type in CPA, call them. And the first question that you ask them is I would say, can you explain to how notarial acts affect my self-employment tax? And just be quiet. And if they don't give you an explanation like I just did,
I love it.
Go on to the next one. Because I've had so many times where I've had users come in and they're like, well, my accountant says you can't do that. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, how do I have to say a nice way of saying you need to find a new accountant because you're losing thousands of dollars every year. So that's a big thing I always say is in there, and you can Google it or whatever. Just go there on our YouTube channel. We've got a video about it. I can't remember which one, but there's a video where I kind of go into more in depth, explain it. That I know this is kind of a little late, but don't wait till the last minute. You wouldn't believe how many people we get that literally the weekend before taxes are due, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm trying to put all this stuff together." And obviously, it's our busiest weekend. The longer you wait, the more stressful it's going to be. Even if you think it's a big undertaking, take a little piece of it. Say, "Hey, every day I'm going to devote 15 minutes to it until it's done." And honestly, if you do it and you keep up on it, and that's absolutely what NotaryGadget helps you do. Is at the end of the year, it's a piece of cake. You go in, you print off your profit and loss report, and done. And it's got if you scan your receipts, it's got a copy of your receipts, your complete transaction breakdown. It's the whole 9 yards.
Everything done for you.
Yeah, everything done for you. So, and the last I'll say is commonly missed mistakes with, one of the ones that I always say a lot of people miss on is a lot of people don't think about their mileage when they're going to and from things that they're doing for their business. So if you're going to Staples to buy paper, make sure you're writing off your mileage on that. You go to Staples to look at desks, write it off. That's still a business expense. You don't have to buy something just to make it a business expense. If you go there with the intent of looking for something for your business, you can do it. You go to a conference, write off your mileage, write off your meals, write off as much as you possibly can. And ask your accountant tons and tons and tons of questions. Part of what you pay for with a CPA, and I've always thought this way, is part of what you're paying for is them doing the service of doing the work for you. The other part, what you're paying for, is an education. And I think that's probably the most important thing that you can get out of that, because they'll help you find other ways to save money. There's tons of ways of being a self-employed person.
and training, all things that are commonly missed.
There's so many things. There's self-employed health plans. There's I could do a whole sector on just that section of setting up 401ks and tons of ways to save way more money being self-employed than you can as an employee.
Excellent. And
sorry to interrupt you, Michael, but
go ahead.
Is asking Steve to repeat the question that they should ask their CPA.
Yep. So I would ask them, I'll say it slow so you guys can write it down or put it on there, but I would say to an accountant, I'd say, hi, can you explain to me how my notarial acts affect my self-employment tax that I would normally owe? And I would just stop right there and then let them, they should know right away. Oh yeah, but if you're a notary, you get to reduce the amount of self-employment taxes you have based on the number of notarial acts or the amount of money you've charged for doing notarial acts. So that's the answer that you want to hear. If they stumble around about it, then I would probably move on to the other one. Or if they say, well, I'm not really sure, but I'll look it up, then that's great. Great. Can you do that and then get back to me? But don't give them the answer, because if you give them the answer, you have to convince them why they should be doing it. So
okay. All right. And thank you, Steve. And Lori, if we could interrupt your sleeping, snoring dog for just a moment, or give us your top tips. Or is there something
the most important thing I think is taking care of it right away. So as soon as you're done with the day, go in and do it. Take that, no matter how tired you are, just take the 5 to 10 minutes, get it done. So you're not lost in the shuffle and things aren't lost in the shuffle later. Yeah,
Perfect.
that would be my number one for me at least.
In other words, stay on top of it day by day.
Yeah,
And,
even
don't let it get out of control.
Yeah,
Mhm.
as soon as the work day's done, that's part of your work day and schedule it in.
Nice. I agree with you. It's much easier to do that than on April 14th to sit down with a
Well,
mountain
even
of
at the
documents
end
and
of the
try to figure
week.
out what happened.
Even at the end of the week, when everything's been going on and you have so many things that happen, that I mean, I know my memory is like, was that Monday or was that Tuesday or was that Wednesday?
Exactly.
So
Okay.
yeah, just get it done.
Great. Thanks. Great tip. And Alana, did we hear from Andrea?
Andrea,
No,
not
no,
have
I
a tax
I
tip,
didn't
but she shared plenty.
Well, can we put you on the spot? What's your number one thing, Andrea? What's your number one thing on this topic?
I'm just gonna piggyback off of what Lori said. Stay on top of it. That is my New Year's resolution, and I'm doing
There you
great so
go.
far. And so I think Lori is on to something there.
All right, that's great advice. And to our audience, thank you so much for sticking with us. And I hope that you found this topic useful. We will be talking, what are we talking about next week, next time?
Our next roundtable is on April 16th at 3 p.m. Pacific, and we will be talking about acquiring a notary commission.
Oh, okay.
And if any of our audience is interested in using NotaryGadget, I put our affiliate link in the chat, so be sure to check that out.
Okay. And you have a great website, Steve, so there's lots of information on these
thank you.
topics too.
Yep.
As a follow-up, if there are things you wanted to delve into more, please just click through to that. We thank you all for joining us and wish you a very great rest of the month here in March.
Yep.
See you
Thank
next
you.
time. All right.
One last thing I'll leave you guys with, because you mentioned the website. There's a tab called Learning Center on our website that talks a lot about the stuff that I just talked about too. So
Okay.
that's a great one. If you guys don't remember it, I think pretty much everything I said is right there. It's in writing, obviously, not in my voice, but
Okay.
but it's a pretty easy
All
read.
right.
So
all right.
I
But
think
thanks
we
for
should
having-
do another one of these and talk more about deductions and the things that we're missing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'd love to
definitely.
hear from our audience if they're still there. Tell us whether that resonates with you. We'll make sure that we'll get that on the agenda. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
Joining.
Bye.
Night.
All right.
Everyone.
Have a great one. Hello, I'm Michael Ray, CEO of Notary2Pro. Thanks for joining us for this webinar. Be sure to see our website, Notary2Pro.com, for more information and resources. Also, don't forget to sign up with us there for great additional updates, news, and tools. Notary2Pro is the most respected professional signing agent course in the United States. Founded by Carol Ray in 2009, Notary2Pro has trained more than 10,000 notaries to become professional signing agents. Our graduates are preferred by more signing agencies because only Notary2Pro enables notaries to practice error-free signings. Thanks again, and see you next time.